right, this is Hyperborean Radio. We are censored. I am Celtic God. With me today is the Lore Keeper as usual. I would like to thank everybody that's working on getting us our second mic so that you don't have to listen to the mic bump back and forth as we pass it back and forth. But that's because listens are going up on the uncensored version like crazy this week. It's just insane. Thanks everybody that's been listening to the uncensored version on their favorite podcast platform. And here on YouTube, where we get bubkiss, but we are here for you. I want to remind you to stab the shit out of that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure to punch that thumb in either direction. It doesn't really matter. Either direction helps the algorithm. And make sure to finger that little bell. And then other than that, we're going to be talking about the warrior spirit today. So before we get into it, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. And I think this is going to be a pretty good topic, especially for the times we're living in. And I also think that it's going to play really well into the next podcast we're planning on doing next Sunday. But I'll let you get us started.
Well, the idea for this podcast, we've had it for a while. We've discussed it in part. We've touched on it. But it's actually stimulated from a meme of all things. And I don't have the meme up in front of me because I am never prepared for anything. But basically what it talks about is not to say bad things about yourself, because the warrior within hears this and then responds in kind. And it's very important. And then another thing that I really want to drive in is a lot of people think of the warrior spirit as they think anger, grrr, roar, stab, stab. When really it's about resolve. Resolve. Which is very different from the anger, grrr, grrr, stab, stab. It's not that that's not part of it, because it can be. Anger is a natural response. We have emotions for a reason. But it's the resolve that is the most important.
Well, and I think that the meme you're talking about, it's, what was it? It was, be careful what you say to yourself, and something about not belittling yourself. And for there is a young warrior within, and he hears everything that you say. And when you belittle yourself, it makes him smaller. It makes you smaller. And I also think that the important thing to bring up here is we're not talking about warriors as a class of people or a group of people. What we're talking about is actually that bit inside all of us that is the warrior spirit. Because we are a warlike people. You can see that through our history. We, up until World War I and World War II, where it became a bit too random death, we are very warlike and we enjoyed it. That's why there's 100 years war, because it was fun in some ways. It became a sport, as CG said. But the archetype of the warrior, so whether or not that's Mars or Nuada or Perun or any of these deities, most notably I would argue Tyr. Because how is it you described Tyr? You described him as that little voice in your head that says, get up.
Yes, anybody that's been in one of these situations, most soldiers or laborers even, or somebody or fighters, they hear it, they report hearing it. But usually it's at that moment when you're literally knocked down and you're just dazed and you just don't want to get back up. And that drill sergeant voice that everybody refers to that says, get up. Get up. That's Tyr talking to us directly.
Precisely. And if you are someone that subscribes fully or partly to the archetype argument of the gods, you could argue that Tyr and all these warrior gods are the warrior spirit within each of us. So therefore, when you belittle yourself, when you belittle and call yourself names and insult yourself, you're kind of insulting in some way a bit of the divine, the gods themselves. but you're just making yourself weaker. You are rendering yourself less capable, less important. And I'll be honest, myself, when I was younger, even just a few years ago, I was definitely somebody that was like, oh, you silly fool, why did you do that? Or you idiot, why did you do that? You suck. Just constantly belittling myself because I was a perfectionist. I was somebody that every time I did something a little bit wrong, I would hyperanalyze it, be like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I let myself do that? Gosh, why am I so stupid? That after a while, it affects you.
Well, yeah, that mental attitude actually makes you weaker. A lot of people like to talk about the degenerate. This is degenerate and that's degenerate, and don't do this because it's degenerate. That action that you was just talking about is degenerate. Focusing, not just saying empty words to yourself, but actually coming to understand that you are worthwhile, that you can be strong, and reaffirming that is generative rather than degenerate. Degenerate just means it takes away from.
Precisely. And when we belittle these different parts of ourselves, we are just making ourselves weaker. We are becoming less generative in what we're able to do. And I think this is especially important because we're in a time period where we need that warrior on the inside more than ever. And we have, in many cases, we've belittled them. And this goes for men and for women. It's not just the masculine side, it's also the feminine side. To quote something everybody likes to bring up, it's that old Spartan quote, on your shield or with it. Or another good one is only Spartan women can give birth to Spartan men. There is a feminine warrior spirit as well. It's not quite the same thing, but it is there.
Well, and that's not to say to ignore any weaknesses that you have and pretend that they're not there and just say good things about yourself. Social justice, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. That's not at all what we're saying. Because you do need to acknowledge your, let's call them weak points. You have to acknowledge what's there so that you can build it up to be stronger. But to focus solely on that will cripple you. I've seen it 100 times if I've seen it once, where people just, they focus on, well, I'm not strong, I'm not brave enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not whatever enough, to the point where they cripple themselves. And that's not helpful to anybody. Acknowledge this, yes, so that you can work to strengthen those areas. But to sit there and focus on it is to just genuinely, it just takes away from yourself, and it makes you less likely to be strong. It makes you less likely to show courage or to be selfless. All these noble aspects that we know are noble. And these noble aspects, they're based in strength, courage, and wisdom.
And this is something that I think people need to hear, because within us, especially when we're young, most of us by default, there's some strength there. There's some courage there. Wisdom's got to be earned, but there's not too bad of a head on your shoulders. It's like part of it's the naivete when we're young, because partly we think we're invulnerable. But it's like we've said before, we are pagan or ethnically, spiritually Hyperborean by default. We have to be taught to be otherwise. And whenever we treat this way of ourselves with disdain and we insult ourselves, I know some people motivate themselves with, come on, bitch, come on, you can lift that. It's not necessarily very helpful. And for many people, I think it's more damaging. That's why I brought up the whole the little voice of tear in your head where you're like, get up. Come on, get up. Get up, you can do it. Do it now. Come on. It's because that's what we need to do. Doesn't mean let your ego run wild. It doesn't mean go nuts and never think critically about what you did, never consider things, never take constructive criticism. But a lot of us have such a low value on ourselves. Our self-esteem has dropped. And I think a lot of that has to do with we're perpetuating it ourselves.
Well, and in many ways, that's where the resolve comes in, as opposed to relying on an emotion, because emotions are fuel that we can use to drive us forward or to make us run away. How we use the fuel is up to us, but the emotions are the fuel. But the resolve, that's like the steering wheel, so that you can actually direct which way you go. So resolve is, well, if I have to explain it, you're in the wrong freaking place. Your IQ is too low. Go away. Because I shouldn't have to explain to anybody what resolve is. And this is actually why the uncensored version of Hyperborean Radio is much better, is because I can actually let loose. There is so many less because I'm not striving to get around ways of saying things. So yeah, basically, resolve. Resolve is one of the most important aspects of that warrior spirit. And the resolve, even if you have these weaknesses and you know that they're weaknesses, you won't focus on them being your weaknesses. You'll figure out ways to make them your strengths or to bolster them up so that they are less weak. It allows true courage, that when you're scared, cowardice is not feeling fear. Cowardice is surrendering to fear. Courage is another word for resolve. That is the facing this thing that you fear, even though you just want to make dirt in your pants and drop water on the floor. Resolve. That's the courage. That's also strength in many ways, because you say strength, everybody thinks how much you can lift, how much you bench, bro. Well, there's many different kinds of strength, and a lot of it is tied into resolve. Resolve is the most important thing that you can nurture, that you can get to grow, because resolve keeps you from quitting when things get hard.
Precisely. And actually, to use a pop culture example, because people tend to recognize these, Captain America. In the Marvel Universe, I'm not sure how close that is to the actual comics, but in the film, he starts out as basically a scraggly ass boy who, doesn't have almost any muscle on his bones. He's tiny. He almost looks malformed, but he doesn't back down. Two people way bigger than himself, armed with brass knuckles, just beating the heck out of him, and he still gets up. It's why he has that whole line that happens in so many films where he's like, I can do this all day, and he's just beating the frick up. That level of resolve, that's one of the reasons that character, which was actually, despite being a symbol of America, Captain America before that film, was a very B-list character, more or less. I mean, he was still important in the overall Marvel comics, but it's the way that the character was portrayed. I mean, most people even recognize that is the character himself is fairly boring. But whatever your opinions on the actor, he took what it was given to him and he made the character intriguing, big and important. He made us think about things. And that's the other thing is, if you want to be a hero and you want the next generation to have something to actually grow with, then you have to build yourself up to become stronger, better. Because our heroes that all of our children look to should not just be fictional. That's one thing that I think is kind of messing with people's heads is, how do I compete with Batman? How do I compete with Iron Man? Because people have sort of forgotten the heroism of every day, of people. And I think this is something that it's done very well with a quote with Gandalf, which is the whole, everyone thinks it's the big flashy things that brings light to the world, but it's all the little things. We have the little warrior, the warrior spirit, and that ability to create light, a little bit of a hero in all of us. We have to nurture it.
The Lord Keeper saving me from myself because we are on the YouTubes. He watches very closely, and then when I start getting all sorts of riled up, he's like, give me the mic, give me the mic, give me the mic before you say something that's going to get us kicked off here. I can see it on his face every time I take the mic. He's like, please don't. Please don't. Okay, anyways, what I was going to say, one thing all heroes have in common, across the board, male or female, doesn't matter. They're all bigger than life. And they're bigger than life in a positive way. Whether they're boisterous or not, it doesn't matter. Whatever they do it, they're all in. Whether they're cooking pies, they are the best pie baker person at that moment. They are all in on everything that they do. And that's what the heroes are. And it doesn't matter if they're fictional, if they're folklore, if they're real. Because there's people that I grew up with that to me were heroes. They were bigger than life. Maybe not 24 hours a day because they did sleep and I didn't see them 24 hours a day. But whatever they did, they were always bigger than life and always about doing something. Even when they was doing nothing, like you might see them and they're just sitting in a chair. Ask them, what are they doing? Well, I'm not doing anything at the moment. They are doing nothing bigger than life. They are doing nothing, more nothing than you've ever seen anybody else do nothing. It's weird. It doesn't sound right, but it is. You can do nothing so big that you inspire other people to just sit down and do nothing. It doesn't sound right, but if you think about, if you've ever seen it, you know for sure what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, then you're going to have to use your imagination, but it really is a thing that you can be bigger than life in anything that you do, even if you're doing nothing. And then also doing inspirational things. Like my grandmother, for instance. She's going to make pie, but she only has half the ingredients. She figures out how to make a pie, and oddly, somehow, she heroically managed to make it taste good. I don't know how, but she would. And that's a small thing. That's just baking a pie. That's not like my stepdad and my uncles and my cousins, and we'd go out and who can pick up the front end of the pickup truck, stand in front, doing strongman stuff. Who can throw a block of wood the furthest, and who can yell the loudest, and who can throw the axe the furthest or the straightest. That's obviously along those heroic lines, but it could be something like catching a fish. It can be something like training a dog. I can get this dog that isn't even my dog to listen to me because I am bigger than life and the dog knows to listen to me. It's about inspiring other people around you. And that's the hero. And warriors are heroes. That's what they are. If you want to be a warrior, you have to become a hero. And all of our people, we have that warrior spirit inside. How much of it is you bring forth can vary widely.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase it. I think it was Albert Camus, or there's many other people who have said something like this, and it's true, which is you have to live your life, especially in times like this, where it gets to the point where your very existence is an act of rebellion. In a healthier society, it's your very existence is an act of inspiration. But in a less healthy society, it's more of a defiance. And that is something that I think is missing. Not to pick on anyone specifically, but when you look around our people in general, inside this sphere that we tend to talk to and outside of it, we are in this weird state of quasi-melancholy desperation, just rage fest, and all these things. People are not drawn to that. They're not drawn to the raging person, throwing stuff. They're not drawn to the melancholic, the Eeyore of the 100-acre word. Hope. They want hope. They want courage. They want strength. They want wisdom. They want something they can emulate and become better. And I think that is something that by rejecting, by denying, by constraining, insulting, belittling that warrior spirit within us, the little warrior within, that we have caused ourselves to be less than what we're capable of. And my hope kind of with this talk is that it inspires people to start rebuilding themselves and to keep, especially the younger people, the ones coming up right now, whether you have kids or someone who's young, especially at that, age where they're just sort of entering adulthood, tell them to pick themselves up, to not let them belittle themselves. And that goes for everyone that's listening too. Do not belittle yourselves. Understand constructive criticism. Work to be better. There's nothing wrong or to be ashamed of in being weak, but there is some.
No, in being weak there is.
Yes, but my point, what I'm getting at is, but there is in staying weak.
Yeah.
Once you are in that situation, it is on you to decide to not be that. If you choose to stay weak after that point, that is when it is truly a dishonorable act.
Right. Okay. So use building on the idea that that I've mentioned before, that it's understandable right up until the person knows. So like yes, it is shameful to be weak, but if you don't know that you're weak, then that falls into a different category. But once you know, it's not reasonable. Vulnerable and weak are not the same thing. There's no shame in being vulnerable. There is shame in being weak, but you can't do anything about it until you know. So, yeah, basically that's he was talking about the before you know part. I was talking about the after you know thing, or part of it. So, yeah, if you're weak and you didn't know it until just this moment, identify what those weaknesses are. Start bolstering them. Turn your weaknesses into strengths. It's going to take time. You're not going to do it immediately. And there's no shame in growing these weaknesses into strengths. So long as you're moving forward, it's good. It's when you stop and you wallow in it. That's when it's shameful. So don't do that. And the only way to move forward is through resolve. It really is. There's no more simple way to do it, for me to explain it. Some people will get it. Other people will think that they get it. And some people will be sitting there going, I have no idea what he's talking about. But what's the new fancy term everybody likes to use? Meditate on it. What does that mean? But don't get all weird and esoteric about it. It's kind of like thinking about a riddle. What is that one riddle we was talking about earlier today? Why is a raven like a writing desk? It's a good thought exercise. There's no singular answer to it, but it is good to think about it. And that's what meditating actually is. It's just thinking. Another thinking exercise is the riddle of steel. And there's like hundreds of them out there. So identify the weaknesses within yourself and try to bolster them up, not to make them weaker, but so that they're less weak, so that they are less detrimental to yourself and potentially even becoming strengths.
Well, you mentioned the riddle of steel, and there's actually a good line on that, which is when he has Conan crucified in that film, he says, contemplate this on the tree of woe. And there's one word I want to really focus in on there, and that's contemplate. The way most people think of meditation nowadays, it's this weird Asian way that it just ends up making, like the kind of odd. Yeah, it becomes a way of not thinking.
It's actually degenerative.
It is degenerative. That doesn't mean we don't have meditation, but it's not the same as the Asian meditation. And I think a better word for us is contemplation. Contemplate this on the tree of woe. When the hermits go out into the woods, they don't go under a waterfall and meditate. They contemplate these things. They think about it. It is something that allows them to move forward.
It's actually what quiets our mind.
Yeah, it's what quiets our mind, is the ability to gain clarity. But that clarity is through pushing upstream. It's not by letting the water carry you.
Right. And also take heart in knowing that our people, we do better. We thrive under pressure. It might not seem like it, but we do. When there is no pressure, when there is no conflict, when there is no strife, we kind of wither up. We stop pushing forward. We stop growing, and we just kind of lay there and slowly die. So right now is a perfect time for our people. And then something else is recently brought to my attention. We are living in the age of the wolves, and I look around, and I see very few wolves, but I see a lot of feral dogs. That is something worth contemplating. Why are there so many feral dogs and so few wolves? And many of these feral dogs think themselves to be wolves.
Well, it's to sort of give an example. And actually, I'll draw again on both my own thoughts and pop culture and stuff like that for this, but there is this story in the Discworld novels where the dogs are talking about this great mythology of the wolves and how the wolves have great names like Greytooth and Silverback and all these other really cool, almost werewolf names. And the character who's listening to them actually basically says they're talking about this stuff, but wolves don't worry about that. Wolves don't even have names. They have no need of them. And I think that that's something that we've sort of allowed ourselves to be consumed with. Is we've talked about this a lot, but paganism, ethnic faith, it's technically not a religion. Religion is a construct that people come up with. It is something outside yourself that you sort of submit yourself to. Ethnic faith is inherent.
Right, it's who we are.
It's Weltanschauung, as some people will call it, or a worldview is the English term. And this in and of itself, while there are stories and there are different celebrations and different trials and all these things that go with it, it's not exactly what most people try to make it into. And the reason I think this is important is, what does a bear say its religion is? If a bear could talk and didn't want to maul you or anything, what would a bear say its religion is? It might look at you kind of weird and be like, bear. It's a bear. A bear is a bear, a bear. A bear's over there, it's a bear, it's over there. It's bear, bear, bear. And that's what we need to be. We are treating this as something outside ourselves. It is not. And like I mentioned at the beginning, this warrior spirit, this get up, you can do it. Do not dishonor yourself. Do not dishonor everything that came before you. Get up. That is inherent to us. That is something that is of us. We can't escape it.
Yeah, that voice. And I think many of us that's lived has heard it. And we understand that it also means get up, the future dies with you. So you have to get up. You have to. There is no if I get up or, well, when I get up. It's no, I have to get up or everything fails. Everything fails with me. That's that drive. It's for what is to come. It's for the children. It's for the grandchildren that might not even be born yet, or the grandchildren's grandchildren, which are almost definitely not born yet, unless you happen to be really, really old and you're really, really lucky. Congratulations. But you guys know what I mean. There is that deep-seated resolve. And then when I say feral dogs, that currently we aren't in the age of wolves yet because there's not enough wolves out there. We're in the age of feral dogs. And how do you identify these feral dogs? They rely on anger. They forget that wolves are also kind. They are also generous. They are also giving. They are also empathetic and sympathetic. But these feral dogs, they just lash out in any direction at anything that is not themselves, that is not their tight little pack, and they just lash out like crazy because they're relying on anger, and they're so angry because they're so afraid. That's Yoda and his fear leads to anger and blah, blah, blah. That's not too far off the mark. That's not all that causes anger. It's not just fear that causes anger. It depends on how you break it down. If you want to get all weird and esoteric, sure. But in a lot of these individuals, I see a overwhelming amount of fear, which then leads them to anger, which then leads them to lashing out blindly. And that's where the problem comes in. They're lashing out blindly without focus, without forethought, without a plan. Wolves plan. They think, they understand. They have more emotions than kill.
Well, just to visualize this, say you have a sword and you're just flailing about crazily with it, spinning around, waving the sword around, and you're not hitting anything. Everyone's like, what the frick's going on? Now imagine, instead of doing that, you took that same sword and you stabbed your enemy right through the heart. What was the more intense, scary, focused, powerful move? The flailing blindly at nothing, wearing yourself out, probably hurting yourself even. And the people,
Potentially your friends.
Potentially your friends, your family, the people you care about, your dog Whiskers, or do you want to focus that, allow yourself the clarity, and then strike forth? There is a very big difference. It's one of the reasons that a hallmark of an adult, especially men, is the ability to focus. The ability to... Especially under pressure. To compartmentalize these things that are otherwise a problem. Because here's the thing is, there's nothing wrong with understanding that you have to take care of the bills. That you should probably fix that leaky faucet. That you might need to cook tonight. Oh, and what about little Sarah's baseball game? All these things. Oh, and Wolfgang's got his piano recital. But let's say that you and your wife are walking home from date night and you get robbed. Do you want to be like, oh, I can't do this, I have to worry about the bills and the piano recital? Or do you want to be able to either mitigate the situation or just nip it in the bud to protect the person? You have to be able to understand that in that moment, this other stuff, this more modern problems that we have, they don't matter because the primal problem of you versus the threat is there. And it's why the warrior archetype, people will get into this whole, well, everybody has X archetype. Well, no shit. Everybody needs that. Everyone needs a little bit of the sage. Everyone needs a little bit of the lover. Everyone needs a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We all need a little bit of warrior in us, or else we are children. And even the children have the warrior. It just hasn't decided if it's been belittled or if it's going to grow yet.
Yes, and courage is a choice. And courage, ultimately, and I've said it several times already, and I'm going to say it again, courage is resolve. And why am I frequently repeating myself more and more on the YouTube version of the podcast, on the censored Hyperborean radio? Because people don't listen, quite frankly. They will play things on double speed. I think that's all that you can go up on YouTube. And then they end up missing all kinds of the content because they get up and go to the bathroom, or they just didn't catch it because it was going by too fast, or they don't understand it because they didn't catch the tone of voice. Or another one that I've frequently seen in real life, somebody trying to show me a video, and they'll watch 15 seconds of it, skip forward 1 minute, listen to 30 seconds of it, skip forward another minute, and then repeat the process. So then they end up missing a lot of stuff. So the people that's already heard this 3 or 4 times, congratulations, you win. And you will actually hopefully come to a deeper understanding of what we're talking about. The warrior spirit is more than just draw the sword, charge off into battle, pretend to be fearless, and fight until you die. There's far more to it. It actually does involve taking, I think you said it was Wolfgang to the piano recital and little Sarah to the baseball game. It does actually involve cutting up the meat for dinner, potentially cooking the dinner, hugging your wife, giving her a kiss, hugging your husband, giving him a kiss, picking the kids up when they fall down and they're crying and letting them know that they're all right and sending them on their way. Say, go do it again, but be better about it. That is also part of the warrior, because the warrior is also a teacher. If the warrior does not teach the young how to be warriors, they won't know what it is. That's why the whole notion of what a warrior is so messed up today. When I see some social justice warrior with pink hair, I'm a warrior, while they're sipping on their soy latte and screaming about how life ain't fair, no, that's not a warrior.
Well, and I think this is another thing to bring up, is simply put, you are not the things you own. I don't care if you are dirt poor. I don't care if you're super rich. The things you own do not define you.
They shouldn't.
This is just the reality of it. Without all of that, strip naked, strip bare, that is who we are. Everything else is extra. Your underwear, your pants, whatever specific haircut you decided you wanted to get, piercings, all this stuff, these are just extra. They're decorations. If you have a sword or a gun, that doesn't make you a warrior. If you have a shield, that doesn't make you a warrior. And it doesn't even necessarily embolden your spirit. Some of the greatest cowards have guns.
All through history.
All through history. And this is why, like we've talked about it before, the archetype of the king, the high king that appears in mythology. Strip them naked, throw them in the woods, have them live there for 5 years, come out covered in mud. They're still a high king in their very spirit. And this is another thing, is we have, especially with the monarchies in Europe, we have become so convinced over time of the aesthetic of nobility that it's about what you look like.
It's not fucking hereditary.
It's not hereditary. Nobility is a choice. All of us are descended of the gods. All of us have that potential for nobility. All of us must make the choice. Do we become noble or not? It's not what we own. It's who we are inside. To use an example, and I know I keep pulling from pop culture, but it's what a lot of people know, which is why I often choose to use that rather than some obscure German tale I read that I like. In The Simpsons, in the early seasons, there's an episode where Mr. Burns commissions Marge to paint a picture of him, a portrait. And she tries over and over again. At the very end, she decides to paint him completely naked, laid bare. Why? Because of all the things he does, of all these horrible things that Mr. Burns does, all of his money, his mansion, his company, his power, all these things, beneath all of it is a withered, tired old man. And that's what she decided to portray. She did what she was asked, and she portrayed the truth, which is, under all of that is a man simply scared of his own demise. Frail. And that's another thing. Who are we when we are laid bare? I'm not encouraging streaking or anything like that. I am merely stating, without all the glitz and glamour, who are we? What are we? Think about that. Who do you want to be if you're bared? And not physically, just spiritually, inwardly. Do you want to be the warrior? Do you want to be the artisan? Do you want to be the bard? Do you want to be noble? Or is it all decoration? And that is the choice we make every single day. Do we insult the warrior? Do we insult our own nobility? Or do we build it up? And I'm not talking about being pompous. I'm talking about holding yourself regally, of behaving with nobility, with care, with humbleness, with strength, courage, wisdom, being an inspiration to your people and a rebellion against the petty tyrants who think they have power because of the extra decorations they carry. You are not the amount of jewelry you have. You are not the money in your wallet. You are not your car. You are not your house. You are not your yard. You are you. And we need to remember that.
But yeah, exactly like you said earlier, you can take that High King. He's High King because of who he is. It's not who his parents are. It's not how much money he has. It's because of his character. You can strip him naked, beat him, cast him into the forest. And he lived there for many years. And he will walk out again, still a High King. That's just the way it is. He will carry himself with the pride of all of his people, and not empty pride. Well, my skin is my uniform, and therefore I have pride because of my skin. No. It runs deeper than that. Way, way deeper than that. He carries his people on his shoulders, and he understands what that means. There is so much more to us than just our skeletal build, just our skin tone, just our hair, just even our blood or muscles. There is so much more to us that can be laid bare. You want to see what that means to lay yourself bare. The arts is one thing to look to. In particular, there's very little in the modern world that I can actually point to. But things like Bach, the Ode to Joy. He laid himself bare. The Moonlight Sonata. Pavarotti singing, what's the name of that opera?
I don't remember. I think you're thinking of Beethoven, by the way. Ode to Joy, Moonlight Sonata.
Beethoven.
Bach was
the other guy.
Yeah, Bach was the other guy. Paganini, or you've been very fond of a recent song you heard, which was the orchestral version of For the Damaged Coda.
Yes.
And it's these... The thing is, the bards, the artisans, they are the conduits for the divine in many ways. This doesn't mean the divine doesn't come through in other ways. Like when the warrior is fighting, that is a kind of art.
Or holding a child.
Everybody
focuses on the warrior fighting, but everybody focuses on the warrior fighting on the battlefield, which is fair enough. But he is also a father, a brother, a lover, hopefully to women. If he has a dog, his dog loves him. So there is all this kindness and gentleness and teaching and patience within this warrior. However, there is a limit to that. And yes, it has a tendency to come out in the form of battle. But the warrior is more than just a sword or a rifle or a shield. He is ultimately a man. And he's willing to hold himself accountable for everybody around him. If they mess up, he messed up.
Well, we all wear many faces. That's why I said at the start, everyone has a little warrior in them. But the one where the warrior grew up into the adult rather than staying just a smaller piece of the larger whole, that's the warrior. A warrior is inherent. Not everyone is a warrior. That's another topic entirely, though, to get fully into that. That would be multiple shows, really.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. But, for example, an interesting thing that, just touching on this elements of the divine, that's one of the reasons everyone's so miserable. Look around today. The houses we live in, how many people think that's a representation of the divine? Or do you dream of the hobbit home, the turf houses, the tree houses?
The carved wood house.
The carved wood house, the kind out of a Slavic or another fairy tale. The little cottage, the homestead, little house on the prairie, the farm. Something beautiful that was built beautifully. The log cabin, something just beautiful. Or music. There's still the bits of the divine coming out here and there, but it's been so constrained.
Well, and oddly, in the modern day, and it's not anything new, it's just far more common today, people will actually hide behind this. I've seen it where musicians, they hide behind their music rather than letting their music expose who they are. And that's the difference between greatness that lasts for centuries and something that hits the top 10 for a few weeks or even a couple years. The one that truly laid themselves bare stays around for centuries. People don't forget who they are. They may have never heard the music, but they know who they are. Why? Because these people were brave enough to lay their soul bare. Are you brave enough to lay your soul out for everyone to see? I mean, it's a painful and it's a scary thing. It's a very emotional state. And also, here's another thing. Real warriors, they understand that their emotions are fuel, right? So they don't try to shut their emotions down. In modern times, they want you to give in to your emotions, but they also want you to shut them down. Has anybody else noticed this and wondered why? Oh, you feel sad. Feel free to cry. Real men cry. Real men or real women love men who cry and openly sob into whatever, blowing snot bubbles. This is wonderful. And by the way, don't get angry. Don't be overly happy. Don't be overly this or that. Here's a pill for your emotional instability. Don't feel anything, but feel free to cry. But we want you numb. Anybody ever wonder why? It's because our emotions are dangerous, especially when we understand them and we can use them. One way to say it, I guess, is controlling your emotions, but in the modern language, that implies the wrong thing. It implies more that Asians shut your emotions down. That is not what
That's not what controlling your emotions is, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. And there's also a film. There's a film out there called Equilibrium, which is literally about people taking pills to shut their emotions down. And here's the thing: it's like the end of Invictus. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. They encourage you to let your emotions run wild, because then you have no control. So then they sell you the control, which numbs you. So you're simultaneously not in control of yourself and then numbed. That's why people will, under music videos or under films or speeches or paint pictures of paintings, thank you, this makes me feel something. We don't know how to be who we are, what we are, and then we are told to just let everything run rampant to the point where we feel so much that we then have to take something to feel nothing because we don't know why we feel this way or how we feel this way or what to do when we feel this way. We are in a very emotional people. Look at our mythology. Look at our stories. Look at how we behave with each other. There's a reason we've pushed this before and stated. The reason we are so peaceful is because we are so brutal. It is not that, oh no, I don't want to get hurt, or oh no, I don't want to hurt you. It's, I don't want to let loose what will happen if I decide to hit you, if I decide to go to war with you. Because I know the kind of brutality and monster that's in me. And that is what's in all of our people. That's the kind of people we are. It's not a bad thing. It's actually why we're able to create so many beautiful things. Is that emotion that fuels that beast inside of us all. That is important. And it's why we're able to be peaceful. Because the two bears, the two tigers, the two wolf packs, they don't necessarily fight each other just because. There has to be a reason. Because when two things that are a force of nature come into conflict, there will be consequences. There will be losses, permanent losses that can't come back. And that is something that we need to take into account with ourselves, but it's also something we need to master within ourselves.
Yes, and that's where, again, resolve comes in. Is because the resolve is the steering wheel. With the emotion thing, emotions are good. We wouldn't have them if they didn't help us survive. And that's all of the emotions. But in the current state right now, especially considering most people grew up, especially boys, grew up drugged, and a fair amount of girls, there's a lot of what is now adults that are on the verge of freaking out and you ask them what they're feeling, and then they begin to freak out even more because all of a sudden they realize that they don't even know which emotion they're feeling. They know that they're feeling something, but they don't even know what it is. They can't name it, which is a horrible place actually for our people to be in. So, I think that's why a lot of our people are drawn to this Asian way of meditation, this Asian way of self-control, which is just shutting it down. That's the easy way out. For us, that is the easy way out. For the Asians, it works for them. But for Hyperboreans, no. Our emotions, because we can't keep them shut down. We cannot keep that rigid of control over ourselves because our emotions swell too large, too big. Listen to an orchestra, and that is a representation of our emotional states. It can be really, really quiet, or it swells and fills the world with its volume, with its noise, with its cacophony and its symphonic music. Whether it's joy or sorrow or anger or grief, all of these things, these are who we are. And we need to learn how to coordinate them and control them and recognize them for what they are so that we don't become feral dogs lashing out at friends or at least potential friends. Quite often friends, because I see it quite often. People will just get so wrapped up in their anger, they start lashing out blindly in every direction, hurting everything and anything around them. It's actually worse than the example that the Lord Keeper gave earlier, where they're out in the field swinging the sword around wildly around themselves. It's more like they're standing in their living room with their friends and family around them, waving the sword around while they're blindfolded so they can't see what they're doing, dreaming of striking an enemy that's not even present. That's the reality of what living in anger does to you, and it will drive you freaking mad. It's not that anger itself is bad, but when you cannot control it, you cannot direct it. You cannot let it set. You can't compartmentalize and be angry at the right time and joyful at the right time. This whole compartmentalization is bad. Why would you listen to doctors? You know that they're lying about everything else. Why would you listen to these psychiatrists who then want to turn around and give you drugs? And why? Well, they make money off from it. Why are we listening to them? Why? We know all these, the media lies. So why are we listening to them and just taking them at their word and never questioning it? It's not that there's no truths there, but you have to pick through it. Anybody that's listening here understands that. You have to pick through it to find the truth. Same way with politicians, same way with teachers, same way with medicine. It doesn't matter what it is. Why are we taking them at face value, especially when they say compartmentalization of emotions is bad and it will lead to a serious mental breakdown and therefore you will die of a heart attack? No, what that leads to is you getting angry about something when you finally wake up a little bit and you're heartbroken and you're scared. And then you're just angry and you turn into a feral dog. Don't turn into a feral dog. Come to understand yourself so that you stop being angry. And really, apathy towards your enemy is far stronger than anger. Because anger will burn out. You'll only chase them so far. You will only fight them for so long. Once they get away, you'll just stop. However, if you're apathetic towards them and you have resolve, you will never stop. You don't have to be angry at them. You just have to know that they're there. Think about how dangerous that is. Do you think maybe that's why why in the media, on the billboards, in the health sciences and all this other stuff, they're teaching our people, well, don't be apathetic. Anger, express your anger. It's okay to be angry. You just don't lash out at people. Be angry, be angry, be angry. Don't be apathetic. Do you think maybe it's because apathy is more dangerous? Because you can do things The last fly that you killed, what did you feel? Was you angry at it?
Well, and I'd like to bring up something important, which is you brought up psychology. And first of all, for legal reasons, I must state, neither of us are registered psychologists. And please, you know the whole spiel. Freud, who most of modern psychology is based off of, the man was a nutter. And I have to harp on this because Freud even compared his own methods to that used by witch hunters who had their supposed witches tortured for weeks until they were basically so desperate that they would confess to anything and were basically starting to view the witch hunter who, here's a fun fact. The witch hunter and the torturer were two separate people. So the witch hunter starts to be presented as the savior, the hero of authority. That's what your modern psychology is based on.
Yeah, it's a lot of things that they tell you is healthy is not, and a lot of things that they tell you is unhealthy is actually healthy. But that doesn't mean we're not talking about you letting your emotions run free and wild through the tulips in the fields. You have to first understand your emotions, and it will take time. Just like anything else. Develop your courage. How do you develop your courage? You expose yourself to fear. You do things that's uncomfortable. We've mentioned this before. We'll mention it again. You find that thing that is uncomfortable, like, oh, gee, that person over there looks friendly. I really should go over there and say hi to them. Oh, wait, no, they might think I'm weird. Well, right there, you felt uncomfortable. Go over and say hi. That's how you develop your fear, develop your courage, your resistance to fear. It doesn't get rid of fear. It's the ability to face fear and act despite it. And it can start in little ways, like simply saying hello to somebody, offering them your hand to shake, giving some stranger a compliment. And yes, in the modern world, there's legitimate reason to fear doing that. But be bold. Be courageous. It's a choice. Be brave. This is how we begin becoming the warrior that's on the inside and developing the resolve. It's by getting and putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations so that when we get in a really uncomfortable situation, we can be in control. Not comfortable, because uncomfortable situations, they're uncomfortable by definition. That's just the way that it is. But you can remain in control of yourself and not be the one that panics and stands still. You can be the one that doesn't just run away when they should be running backwards when they should be running forwards. You can be the one that doesn't just sit on the floor and cry. You can be the one that actually gets people moving in the right direction because you're used to being uncomfortable. You're not comfortable there because it's uncomfortable. That's like people with a high pain threshold. They still feel pain, and it still hurts. It just takes more to make them that way.
Well, and here's a pro tip from somebody who's lived through it. If you can wallow and lie on the ground in misery groaning, you have time and you have the energy to go for a walk, to take up boxing and punch a punching bag,
To
get punched, to, I don't know, learn to juggle. It's probably not the most incredible thing that you might be feeling, and you might be feeling terrible. But just like that little voice in your head that says, get up and do something, you will feel far better and you will have accomplished far more than just wallowing in your own sadness. And I understand there's a lot of people out there. You're tired. You're exhausted. You're angry. You feel hopeless and dark. Here's the thing. You are not alone. Other people feel that way. Other people still feel that way. There are people out there feeling that right now. This doesn't invalidate the way you feel. But the first step to being better, to being stronger, to getting past that is you. And understanding that in the end, you make the choices of your life. And that doesn't mean there aren't forces acting against it. You can decide to drive to the beach, but a tornado might stop your car. But there's a reason that Stoicism, philosophy that is inherent. The only reason it needed to be made into a philosophy is because of modernity. Just the old school Roman and Celtic, not Celtic, Roman and Greek variety. Before then, that's just basic adulthood. I cannot stop the tide from being high right now, but I can still enjoy walking what's left of the beach. I can still enjoy what I choose to do with my time. I make the decisions for myself.
Yeah, so here's the thing is we're about to wrap up. But I guess being miserable, really it is a choice. And you can be miserable by yourself laying on the floor under your bed, or you can be miserable walking around in the sunshine. I'm pretty sure walking around in the sunshine is just that little bit less miserable than laying under your bed with the dust bunnies. So try to make those positive choices. And here's the thing is I want to thank, because the YouTube channel's been growing a little bit, make sure to share us around. Share us with friends and family, people that you like, people that you hate. It doesn't matter. Share us around. And slowly we'll grow. And yeah. And then hopefully we can start making more of a difference in the world, and we can do this together. It's a long, slow, hard slog. We've been at this for a couple of years together. I was at it a couple of years by myself beforehand. But we are getting there. I've had to start over so many times. It's just crazy. But the resolve keeps us moving. And we can do this together. The more of us that work together, the quicker that we get there, the more that we can get done, the more people that we can help, that we can shake awake, that we can motivate to get out there and do something. Even if it's just saying hello and shaking somebody's hand or telling them that they're doing a good job, but just to provide a little bit of hope and resolve in the world. Because, well, on our next Remember the Music, I'm going to be doing the body folk songs. But after that, I don't think I'm going to give a choice after that. I think after that, I'm going to do some opera. And this is why I'm going to do opera. And I'm only going to do like it'll be off from several of them, but it'll be like the biggest hits. And here's the reason why. Is because in these pieces, some of them is about just pure unadulterated rage. But there's still hope there. Some of them is about complete and utter heartbreak. Just the person is literally dying, and yet there's hope there. Some of it is about joy, and again, there's hope there, but it's easy to have hope when there's joy, which is why I mentioned the other two first. But hope it's one of the underlying aspects of our people, because that is actually how they control us. They will keep putting us in a worse and worse situation, but give us hope. If you just jump high enough, if you just dance fast enough, if you just follow my rules enough. I mean, they've been doing it for the last 2 years with society at large. Dangle the carrot of hope way out there while they're whipping you. Well, let's skip the whipping part and just grab a hold of the hope and everything that's good on the way to it. You know, we don't have to accept this bad stuff that's going on to have hope. We really don't. We can bypass it and flip them the bird and keep right on and moving. But due to our very nature as Hyperboreans, we require hope. We, in the deepest, darkest winter, we hope spring comes. When the spring is there and the food hasn't grown yet, we hope summer comes with the full blush of life. In the summer, when it's hot and we're just melting and we're miserable, we hope fall comes so that the temperatures drop and it's more pleasant. And we have the food from the summer now. And in the fall time, we hope for winter to come with its loving, brisk chill and its biting cold. And then again, we're in winter, we hope that spring comes. It is part of our nature. It is not a bad thing. The society will tell you, well, empty hope, it's a bad thing. And it's just that, it's empty. I'm not talking about empty hope. And again, if society says that hope is meaningless, you might want to think about it. Is it? They lie about so much. Is hope actually meaningless, or is meaningless hope empty? And which one is it that society is offering? I mean, stop and think about that. All right, so I'm going to cut out of here on that big, deep, heavy anchor of a note, and I'm going to remind you guys: don't be safe and don't be quiet. Do keep your powder dry, because the shit's about to hit the fan.
And I will say, when you hear that little voice that says, get up, around the same time that you might be telling yourself stupid or don't do that. Why'd you do that, fool? Instead, think things along the lines of, all right, it's good that I tried. Now I'll do better next time. I'll try again, and I will grow, and I will improve, and I will get stronger. Each adversity is only a momentary step on the way to greatness. Lore Keeper out.